Welcome back to Dan Really Likes Wine after an extended break, in part because I've been on holiday. If I'm looking brown, rather well nourished and extremely content, it's because I've been on my annual pilgrimage to Greece, where as well as fantastic food, beautiful weather and one of the most economically friendly holidays you can find for a South African, there is also a wine industry that continues to delight and to impress in equal measure. And so this week's show celebrates some wine from Europe, a couple of wines I picked up in Greece, and a couple of South African wines that are inspired by grapes from Germany and Austria, possibly not the European countries you might have been anticipating. But before we get to Austria or Germany, a look at Greece and a grape that we might be seeing a bit more of South Africa. You would have seen, if you've been watching the online spaces, that I visited the winery where this wine comes from a couple of months ago. I've now got a bottle here, and it's a grape called assyrtiko that I suspect we're going to be seeing more of in South Africa. So this is the Moraitis Winery in Paros. Paros is a fantastic island. I say that a little reluctantly because I don't want it to be flooded with people, but as long as we keep it between ourselves, I think it's the best island to go to in Greece. It's not as well known as a Mykonos or Santorini, but it's certainly nowhere near as expensive either. There's plenty of nightlife, great restaurants, beautiful beaches, and just a really relaxed feel to it. It's the very best of Greece as far as I'm concerned, and on top of all those other attributes, there is some fine wine. There are grapes grown all over the place on the island. It's a middling-sized island as the Greek Isles go, and the major label they have on the island is this Moraitis. Some of the grapes they grow themselves, others they bring in from around the island, and as you can see just from the product, Greek wine is looking more polished, it's looking more professional. The whole package is looking a lot better. Now you can see there's a bit of English on there, it's no longer just Greek, this is a global product, and if you look at the back, you'll see there, here's a Greek lesson for you, Kitima, Moraiti, Moraitis Estate, Kitima, as the Spaniards might use bodega in Argentina, so here they use Kitima, and this is the grape they grow the most of in Greece. Now Santorini is the spiritual home of assyrtiko, and so on Paros this is what they're aiming for, that Santorini style of white wine. It is incredibly dry when they make it properly, and in a part of the world, the Cape, where water is becoming increasingly scarce, finding a grape that doesn't need much water, which is one of the assyrtiko attributes, is something that makes it a very appealing proposition for wine farmers. If you're traveling in Greece, one of the great attractions for South Africans is that it is very inexpensive, especially as European trips go. Once you've got there, you can find accommodation and food that surprises you with how cheap it is. That extends to wine. You can get some very inexpensive wine that's not necessarily the kind of stuff that's going to leave you with a 4-day hangover. This is a little pricier. Celador, it's about 14 to 16 euros a bottle. At a restaurant, you're probably looking closer to 30 euros, so 450 Rand, although in South Africa it could be 800 Rand by the time you're watching this. So it's slightly more expensive, but this is some of the very best of Greek wine. But just as South Africa likes to see our wine being recognized and as a result paid a little more for internationally, so the Greeks are at a stage where the wine is deserving at the top end of greater accolade and paying a little more for it. Well, the first adjective that always comes into play when you discuss assyrtiko is how dry it is. This is drier than Cape Town on day 0, but don't let that suggest to you that there's nothing more to it than just dryness. There's still plenty of character to it. It is a beautiful wine when eaten with fresh fish, which I did a lot of in Greece. Nice big piece of sea bream or sea bass. It cuts through that delightfully. There's a strong minerality to it. It's a lovely wine, as the Greeks might say, Poleoria, and as the South Africans will hopefully be saying, a lot of baie lekker when this touches down, because I think it could have a great future here in the Winelands. And from Greece to Germany, not the most natural of segues at the moment, perhaps. The Greeks and the Germans aren't the best of friends in a European context, but if you set aside politics and focus on far more important things like wine, then it becomes a little more natural, because both the Greeks and the Germans love their food and love their wine. Now, wine in Germany might not be something you'd expect, kind of like German comedy, for instance, but the German comedy scene is actually quite strong, and so too is their love of and ability to make wine. The Germans and the Swiss, particularly with some very specific grapes, and this is one of them, the gewurztraminer, which is a German grape, but in this case not brought in from Germany. This is actually grown just outside of Elgin. This is Paul Cluver, home to the Seven Flags, home to a very nice Riesling. I had some just the other night with a Thai green curry that worked beautifully, and then there's another wine that would probably go very nicely with a Thai green curry. The gewurztraminer is not made very much in South Africa. There are a handful of estates who can lay claim to it. Of all the ones who do, and it's being a big fish in a small pond, this is generally considered to be the best of the lot, and it is a white grape, very different to the ones you might normally drink, but especially as we sit towards the end of winter here in South Africa, a wine that in the cooler climes and the colder months has got a lot of appeal. Now, the bottle of this gewurztraminer is tall, slim and elegant, much like myself, and it gives way to a very elegant wine. Your introduction is the nose, and it's a nose that yells out Turkish delight. Now, if the Greeks and the Germans have their differences, then the Germans and the Turks aren't always the best of friends, as Mesut Ozil would tell you after the recent Football World Cup. But in terms of food and wine, always a way to bring people together, and that Turkish delight signals the arrival of a terrific, terrific German grape. It's very slightly sweet, certainly not sickly so, not cloyingly so. Just that little hint of sweetness, and much like the Paul Cluver Riesling I had last week, went really well with a curry, so this would as well, a prawn curry, a Thai curry, where you're looking for something that's crisp but strong enough to cut through it. Nice big bold mouth, probably take a while to get used to drinking a lot of it, but I think especially in winter, where normally we think of a huge giant bottle of red wine, if you're not really a red person and you want a white wine for winter, I think this could do the job perfectly. It certainly does work for the Germans. Now, sticking with the theme of Germanic wine, but this time heading across the border to Austria. Now, if German wine came as a surprise, you certainly won't be expecting wine from Austria, better known for dead composers and governors of California and Jägermeister-fueled skiing holidays you don't remember an awful lot about, but it turns out the Austrians do make wine, and in particular this, the grüner veltliner. Now, we tend to think in South Africa a little one-dimensionally about white wine. White wine is summer, red wine is winter, broadly speaking, but there are plenty of white wines that do a terrific job during winter. We saw that with the Paul Cluver, and this from Diemersdal, based on an Austrian grape, looks to fill a similar space. One of my favourite memories from time spent in Austria is a little skiing town called Meyerhofen, and being in a dance club afterwards where the DJ was a sort of David Hasselhoff meets Kurt Darren on the decks. It sounds like a very weird combination, but it worked. And pretty much the same with this from Diemersdal. It's at times Sauvignon Blanc, at times Chenin. It's dry, but there's plenty to it. It's a little bit mixed up, but the end result is quite charming. I don't think there's anybody else who does a grüner veltliner here in South Africa, and taking an Austrian grape into the tip of the continent might not seem like the cleverest of ideas, but this has worked, and Diemersdal have somehow got it right for what is a unique but very, very pleasant white wine. Clearly works well in Austria, and I think it's found a decent home in South Africa as well. And to wrap up, we go back to Greece, and the wine that I will shamelessly tell you was always going to be my favourite amongst this quartet. Wine is so often dictated by the surroundings, by the context, by the occasion, and although the wines to my right are more celebrated, are better known, are drunk in far greater quantities, it's this one that is the one that has the best memories, because I've had a fair amount of it. You might remember last year I filmed an episode from Greece with a pair of curly-haired, mustachioed Greek Asterix characters, my wife's uncles. And those two uncles are still making wine, still having a great deal of fun with it. And what I love about this particular wine is the more of it I share with the two of them, the more we can understand each other, even though my Greek is minimal and their English even more so. This is really homemade Greek wine. It's a pair of brothers who've taught themselves how to make wine. They're making it in plastic barrels in the back of a garage from their own grapes, skill passed down from their father, and yet they pull it off. The labelling, as you can see, is handmade, scribbled on, and it's, as I thought when I first had it, probably dreadful. I mean, homemade wine in a plastic barrel by people with no formal wine education. But as I discovered then, and as I know I'm about to discover again now, It's just really pleasant, really lovely, and brings back so many terrific memories of my second home in Greece. So for the few of you who aren't fluent in Greek, the estate, so to speak, just the family name, Kouvelakis, my wife's surname, Yanni and Vasili, are the interchangeable brothers. I've got no idea which one is which. And 2018, that is the year, so it's brand new, made by guys with no wine training, in a plastic barrel in the bottom of a garage from their own grapes. Again, it just really says this can't be drinkable. But I'm about to have a very large glass and show you that, certainly in my opinion, it most definitely is. Now, the key difference to drinking this now as to when I was drinking it in the Choreo of Mavromati, or ancient Messini, the village that my wife's family comes from and a lot of the family still lives in, is that you wouldn't have a wine glass like this. It's a small, slightly chipped glass beaker, and you just wash it down as you eat over a 3 or 4 hour dinner that starts at 10:30, finishes in the small hours of the morning, and is full of Greeks talking, usually all at the same time, all at high volume, and having a great deal of celebration, as the Greeks call it, pareia. So slightly different wine glass, but the wine in there is the same, and already just looking at it and just getting that nose, I'm thinking back to sitting in that little village in a charming part of the Peloponnese and having some wonderful summer evenings. It's not smooth, it's not polished, it's probably not going to leap up the platter rankings anytime soon, but it's designed to just be really blue collar, easygoing village wine that sits perfectly with the kind of village meal you have in a little place like Mavromati. Piles of lamb and potatoes and chicken and salads, all being dished up very enthusiastically by my wife's aunt Ritza and washed down by her husband and her brother-in-law's wine. It's slightly sharp to it. It won't hurt to be a little bit older, but for wine made in 2018 by such an unassuming pair of brothers, for me it's something that's just quite lovely. This speaks to the essence of wine. No multi-million-dollar industry, no marketing, just a handmade label, a great deal of passion, and a pair of brothers who love what they do. I love what they do, as I love what Greek wine is doing, as I love exploring wine from all over the place. My wine heart is certainly in South Africa, but it's great to discover wine from all over the world, to see how different people are doing different things, and to create great memories along the way. Stick to your South African wine by and large, but fit in a holiday to Greece, pick up the occasional bottle of something different, and look out for a different grape or two. Like today, you might discover something you didn't really know about, but have now discovered you quite like. Yassas.